Hello and welcome to the Cap Psych Pod. I'm Kristen Davey, Operations Manager here at Capital Psychological. Today we're joined by Sandra LeBlanc. Sandra is a registered social worker with 25 years experience and has been with our clinic for just over a year now. Sandra works with children, adolescents, adults, and families to navigate through a wide range of mental health issues such as anxiety, depression, attachment issues, trauma, and grief. Sandra, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Kristen. Thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, for sure. So today we're going to dive into a topic that many people can relate to, parenting. Sandra's going to provide some guidance on some self and co-regulation, specifically utilizing the PACE approach. So first, let's talk about self-regulation and co-regulation. So what does self-regulation mean?
So very often parents will come in and ask me if I can teach their child self-regulation skills, or the teachers want them to have self-regulation skills in the classroom, for example. So what self-regulation means is it's the ability to manage your big feelings, your impulses, to think before you act, using self-control, managing yourself, managing your anger, and impulse control, so that you're not like bopping Johnny on the head in the classroom, or doing things that parents or teachers don't like our kids to do. So, however, the problem with this self-regulation is that it can be really, really hard for children when they are young and their brains are not fully developed. And that's one thing we're really becoming a lot more aware of. Their brains are still quite young, and so they need our help.
Right.
And that's where the co-regulation comes in.
Perfect. Okay. So what is co-regulation? How would you describe that?
So because our brain is already fully developed, or at least we hope it is, right? Most of the time it is, but sometimes we have our off days too, and our off moments. So we need to help the child to regulate and calm what we call their fight, flight, or freeze responses, which is kind of like the bottom half of the brain where we don't think rationally. So if the child's not thinking clearly, the bottom half of their brain that's going into that fight, that flight, or freeze response. And so then they can't access their thinking part of their brain. And that's called the frontal cortex. And that's where maybe they know that they should be, using their words and not hitting or not throwing, those kinds of things, but they forget in that moment because they're in that fight, flight, or freeze response, and their bottom half of their brain is activated at that time. So what we need to do is we need to engage and nurture them first through like emotional co-regulation. So for example, being with the child comes first before we teach them.
Okay, that makes sense. So what is the PACE or the PACE approach? Can you explain that?
Sure. So PACE, it was first developed by psychologist Dan Hughes, who developed dyadic developmental psychotherapy. So P stands for playfulness, A stands for acceptance, and C stands for curiosity, and E stands for empathy. And if you like, I can go into them in a little bit more detail for you.
Yeah, sure, that would be great.
So P being playful. So play is really the key to a child's world and their way of learning about the world. So when we engage in playfulness with them, we are showing them an interest in them, we're showing that we care about them, and we want to have fun with them. So we also have to make sure that we're not totally plugged into our devices, like our phones and our electronics, when we're playing with them. We need to be there with them.
That's very hard nowadays.
Yes, yeah, exactly. We get very distracted by all those things. And if we could also use humor with them, that can help us go a long way as parents. We just also have to make sure that we're not using sarcasm instead of humor, because sarcasm could certainly have an impact on them and they could find that hurtful.
Right.
So that's P. And A stands for acceptance. So this one's one of the harder ones I find to use, because what we're doing here is we are accepting the child's feelings and behaviors, and we're just accepting them in that moment. So a parent can accept the feelings, but not necessarily agree with their child or condone the behavior. So for example, they might be like super angry and throwing something or a toy, or maybe even calling us names. And that's hard as a parent to sit there and listen to that. But the acceptance part is saying, okay, wow, I can really see that you're really, really angry right now. Wow, you're super frustrated, or you're really angry with mom, or you're really angry with dad, or you're really frustrated.
Right.
It's not to be confused that we're like accepting that, like it's okay to throw that toy, or it's okay to call me names. That's not what we're saying here. We're just really validating their feelings at that moment. And C is where we're using curiosity. So at this point, we're not really trying to assume that we know what they're feeling or why they're doing something. So an example might be, you see your child laying on the couch and you think, oh, they're just being lazy. So what we need to do here is just be curious and ask questions like, oh, I've seen you've been on the couch more often than usual. I wonder if, maybe like you're just feeling lonely, or you're sad, or what's going on. Just being curious and not assume that it's laziness. And maybe even going further, saying, like with this pandemic, I wonder if you're missing your friends, and like maybe you're just really bored. What's that like for you that you can't see your friends right now?
Right. I feel like for a lot of parents, it's hard to remember that, like, yes, they're a kid, but also they're just like a small human. Like, kids have the same thoughts that we do.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And they don't always want to tell us what they're feeling, because sometimes they don't know what they're feeling either.
Mm-hmm.
They might maybe have a feeling in their stomach, but they're not really sure what's going on.
Right.
And the last one is empathy, where this is where we're trying to understand and be sensitive to what they're feeling and experiencing, and trying to understand their thoughts, basically putting ourselves in their shoes. So, oh, wow, that sounds really hard for you. Of course you're bored. Of course you're missing your friends. I totally get that. It's okay for you to feel sad and lonely and like you're missing out, especially during COVID, right? That it's
For
been
sure.
so hard for all of these kids who have been home for longer periods of time, or maybe not even able to play with friends or peers because they have an immune compromised family member. And so they have to be really careful about socializing. So
Right.
that could be really tough for them.
For sure. Can you tell us a little about the ideal outcome of adopting the PACE approach with regards to parenting?
So the idea of using the paceful approach is to build a safe and trusting and meaningful relationship with children, and for young people who have experienced trauma. And this is what Dan Hughes was doing when he developed it. Yet I've found that you can use this approach with any child, whether there's been trauma or not, and or even with yourself. And that's one thing I encourage parents to do, is to try and be accepting of their own feelings and empathic towards themselves. I encourage teachers to use it with their students at school. And hey, you can even use it on your husband if you want.
It's always good.
Yeah.
Always good to improve any kind of relationship.
Yeah.
So can you walk us through a scenario when this might be applicable?
Yeah. So one example I can give you is, so let's pretend that there's two children who are stuck at home, isolated with their parents because of COVID. Um, and maybe one of them starts to express some anger, throws a toy, and says something like, I'm really tired of playing with these toys all the time. I'm so sick of being with my brother all the time. This, like, I just don't like this anymore. And so as a parent, you might be feeling like, wow, my child's really ungrateful. She has all these toys and, a roof over her head, and she's got a brother to play with. Like, why is she being so? So I need to check myself, and I need to take a moment and breathe and try and not pass my judgment on them. And so this is where I use the A in PACE, being accepting. So, oh my gosh, you seem so angry right now. I wonder if it's really, really hard for you not to be able to see your friends right now. And that's the curiosity. And here you are, you're stuck at home with mom and dad and your little brother. Wow, that must be so hard for you. So there's it's kind of like wrapped up. I didn't really use any P in there. There's no playfulness in that scenario exactly, but like I really tried to use acceptance
Mhm.
and the curiosity, trying to figure out like what it is. Your child might say, yes, I miss all my friends. I don't get to see them anymore. And tired of playing with my brother. So in this situation, the child might still yell, and might still cry, they still might have a temper tantrum, and it might still last for a while. But the hope is that the child's feelings are being heard and they're feeling validated. And as a result of that, meltdown will diffuse in a more timely manner.
Okay.
And if the parent is able to come alongside them and offer them support and using this approach versus something like timeout where they get sent to their room or sit in a corner, which is more of a punitive nature, then this is going to help them become more regulated and calm down faster.
Okay,
It
that
doesn't
makes
change the
sense.
outcome because they still can't play with their friends, but at least they're feeling heard and validated by their parents, and they're learning how to manage big feelings.
Okay. So, is it beneficial for parents to learn how to utilize PACE on themselves before using, like, using it on their children, but like applying that technique when dealing with their kids?
I think so because, again, like I said in that scenario, like you might be thinking, "Wow, my child's so ungrateful and not using the toys that they have," and so we have to really accept our own views and our own values and feelings. And this way, if we're accepting, this is what I'm feeling right now, or I'm feeling really triggered by their reaction, then it's going to help me stay calm. And I'm going to use a little like self-compassion on myself or empathy on myself. And
Okay.
then maybe later on, I might be curious, okay, well, why am I so upset about them with that? And it could be something that goes back to when I was younger about why, maybe my parents told me that I really need to be grateful for toys and that, we only got one toy at Christmas kind of thing.
Right. Okay.
Um, yeah, so it's good to use it on yourself and be empathic with yourself as well as like your spouse too, if you're finding that you're upset with how they've dealt with a situation with their child.
Right. Okay. And what benefits do you see in using PACE versus other parenting approaches?
So I think the biggest benefit of this approach is that you're not trying to change or negate the child's feelings. By using the acceptance, the child feels heard and understood. It doesn't mean that you're condoning the behavior, and the temper tantrum may still happen, but it will not last as long.
Okay. And in what ways does the coronavirus affect the use of PACE? Do you think it makes it more relevant given all the changes that everybody has experienced over the last 2 years?
So definitely, as in the example I used earlier, I think that because of this global crisis, parents need to be more accepting and empathic towards themselves and to each family member, and accepting that it's really hard for us to be isolated, for us to work online, to miss friends, to feel anxious about going in public again, which is something that some people might be dealing with as well,
Mm-hmm.
especially as mandates or restrictions start to lift.
Mm-hmm.
So by being able to use curiosity to wonder aloud, gee, I wonder what you guys are feeling right now. Are you missing your friends? Or is there anything you're worried about at school right now? And are you worried about the masks or not wearing masks? Because each child deals with the situation in a different way. So
Right.
we just need to figure out how they're feeling. So I find using PACE very helpful for any scenario, really.
Right. Perfect. Okay. So switching gears a little bit, let's talk about meltdowns, which is literally every parent's nightmare. Something you talk about is looking for signs of stress in children. Can you walk us through some potential behaviors to look out for?
Yes. So some things you want to look out for is maybe things like toileting accidents, aggressive behavior, defiance when they're seeking power in other ways. So some children right now are maybe seeking control in a lot of different ways because of all the uncertainty that we've been experiencing due to the coronavirus.
Mhm.
Another one you might see is baby talk and asking to be dressed, even though they know how, even though they already have that skill. So they're kind of regressing in their behaviors.
Okay.
But in this case, it's really important to provide the child with the connection that they're looking for that at that time. So if they want to be dressed and it's just once in a while that you need to help them with that, then you're meeting their emotional needs and they're feeling safe. And once they feel safe again, then you'll probably see the baby talk disappear. But then if we use comments like use your big boy or your big girl words, then we might be shaming them and not meeting their emotional needs.
Okay, that makes sense. So what advice can you provide to calm a child when they seem inconsolable?
So one thing I often suggest is just seeing if you can offer them a hug or a touch, just help regulate them in that moment and just listen to their cues of what they need at that time. Other things that might be helpful are providing them with space, providing them with distractions or sensory activities, some kind of physical activity that is obviously safe, like jumping on a trampoline if you have a small trampoline in the house, playing with a ball, and then finding things that they find soothing and calming for themselves, like fidgets or bouncy balls, a rocking chair. Lots of kids find that soothing. Coloring books, puzzles, bubbles. Doing deep breathing with bubbles could be really, really helpful.
So how do you suggest a parent close out a meltdown? Is there an approach that you found useful to reconnect with the child after the fact?
So definitely I always suggest going back later and talking with the child once they're calm. We want to be looking for the teachable moments when you are both calm. So together you can also discuss what they might want or need when they're feeling upset. And this is going to help you with that calming down space or calming down basket. So you might ask them, do you need space? Do you need a hug? What would you like in your calming area or your basket?
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, because I feel like almost everybody has been in the position, whether they have a child or like a niece, nephew, anything like that, and they're just like, "Oh, I can't talk to you right now." Like you get so flustered and upset, and it's hard to be the parent in that situation.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes if you need to walk away yourself, that's okay. And tag team somebody else that might be around. Hopefully there is somebody else that can take over for you, right?
Right.
So that you can go
Ideally.
and you can become calm and collected.
Yeah, for
Mm-hmm.
sure.
And I guess lastly, parenting is really not an easy task and we all make mistakes. So I'm a parent myself. I've made lots of mistakes and we need to practice self-care and we need to try and stay regulated ourselves when we are dealing with children's big emotions. And let's say we don't stay cool, then it's okay for us to go back later on and repair the relationship and just say, hey, I'm really sorry that if mommy yelled or I didn't handle that situation as best as I could have, and I'm really sorry and I love you. Just making sure that the child knows that they're still loved and cared for, and the fact that you're able to apologize and show that you're human is really, really helpful.
Right. And that too, I mean, maybe not if they're super young, but that also shows them that like they're allowed to have emotions because like even like their mom does or even their dad does or the
Mm-hmm.
parent. So that's good.
Yeah, and I think because of COVID, like everybody's emotions are running high right now.
For
So
sure.
even parents are struggling a lot, like, right? So with their own self-regulation. So even harder for us to stay regulated and then help co-regulate our children.
For sure. Alrighty. Well, I think that was all the questions that we had for today. Thank you so much again for joining us. I'm sure this